today. Thanks, Daniel. Desktop audio is working. Can you hear it? Intro music is just a piece that I wrote. It's just called Hybrid Scale. I don't remember what it's from. That's what I had it titled. Welcome, everyone. Let me turn myself up there. So I get asked this chord a lot. This chord. I get asked about this way of thinking a lot. It's really related to Pat Martino. I saw that in the I saw that in one of the comments here, and I get asked many times about this, about Pat Martino. He's a great jazz guitar player that I'm sure a lot of you know, that talks about how he thinks minor over dominant chords. He thinks of the 2 chord, and he solos over dominant chords like he's soloing over minor 7th chord. So if you're soloing over a D7 chord, he's thinking A Dorian, or he's thinking of soloing over an A minor 7 chord. By the way, before I forget, there's a discount on the Beato book and my YouTube transcription bundle. Only for today, $10 off of each one if you enter the code RB251. Anyways, minor 7th chords are really handy for a lot of different things. I just saw on here that Jamesville just said West Montgomery does this all the time too. So a lot of jazz players will think of minor 7th chords. And I'll tell you why. If you take a chord, if I take something like a, if I'm taking a, let's say I take a G major 7 chord, okay? A G major 7 chord, many times, like Wes, for example, is going to play this G6 voicing, okay? He's got the, so you get G, D, so 1, 5, 6, 3. And that's a very common voicing for that. Well, that also could be a great voicing for E minor 7, okay? Well, that G6 too, if you think about this, what notes are they? You got G, you get D, you get E, B. Well, if I reorder those notes in a different way, right? E, G, B, D. If I play that, you have an E minor 7 chord, right? So this G6 chord is really an E minor 7 chord, which is why it works like this, because it's just an inversion. Same with this. Okay, that can be a sub for G6, okay, or G major 7. In the same way, if you're playing over a D7 chord or a D9 chord, if you look at the top of that D9, you see an A minor triad here, right? So you'll hear people play, you know, you hear Matheny play things like that. So, right? That gives you B minor to A minor, gives you that D9 kind of sound. So in that way, these minor 7th chords can function as major 7th chords, like as a major 6 chord. They can function as dominant chords, and obviously they can function as minor 7 chords. Well, soloing over it, like I said, Pat Martino, when you listen to his lines, he plays a lot of lines that are based off minor 7 sounds. Now, there's really a very little difference, obviously, between a D7 chord and an A minor 7th chord. There's really just one note difference between D9 and A minor 7. It's that the G goes to F sharp. So if you are including that F sharp in the right spot, then you're getting a D9 sound. And that's kind of what Pat Martino's doing. That's what Wes would do. Matheny does that a lot. But they would they would play lines that are based off the minor seventh. So if I got this chord here, or I could, so I'm thinking like a C major 7 or C major 9 sound, as if I'm playing A minor 7. And I go up to this note, which could be a D7 voicing, right? And that more is like A minor 7. There's my D7 chord, or D7 sus, right? There's my F sharp that I'm looking for this D7 chord, but I'm really thinking I ended on the A, but that A could be the fifth of that D9 chord. So I'm really targeting those chord tones and using the chromatic notes, but I'm thinking more, right? So I'm thinking A Dorian. And I'm doing a chromatic passing note to go to that fifth of that D7 chord, okay? Right? And I'm resolving to the third there. Or Pat Martino does, he'll do things like this. Or you hear him do it. Who uses those upper neighbor tones? Right? So you're thinking D Mixolydian, but I'm thinking really A Dorian if I'm thinking like Pat Martino. These are where those chromatic notes come in. So I'm playing. Anytime that there's a whole step, what's up, Amy? Anytime that there's a whole step in that scale, I'm filling it in. You could call it the bebop scale if you played from here. But you can play here. Okay, so I'm using those chromatic notes anywhere that there's a half step. So right there. Right. So once again, A minor 7, A Dorian, or thinking of a minor 7 over a dominant chord. So if you were to be playing, let's say, over the, if you were to be playing over the bridge of rhythm changes, just the first two chords, D7 to G7. So I then would be thinking, if I were to reduce it down to just playing over two minor seventh chords, I'd be thinking of playing from A Dorian to D Dorian, okay? Or A minor 7 to D minor 7. And that's really, when you hear, there's a great Pat Martino video that's really old. I think it was like an REH book or something. And he talks about playing subchanges over a dominant chord, over an A7 chord. And he shows how to do combinations of two different minor seventh chords. It's a very old video. It's very weird, but it's cool. He'll think E minor 7, obviously, over A altered, which is kind of weird. But then he'll play B flat minor 7, D flat minor 7, and he goes through and he plays lines based on these minor 7th chords. Linear Expressions, that's one of the books, but that's not the actual book, Rob, that he does that in. In the Linear Expressions book, he goes through and he plays lines, although in the Linear Expressions book, it's all minor 7 lines pretty much, right? But this is a particular video. I think that there's a book that went along with this, but it's not that particular one that's actually was just a book. And the chromatic notes aren't just where the bebop dominant scale is. The bebop dominant, just to review, is where you fill in that half step, 1, is where you fill in a half step between the root, you use the major 7th, and you come to the flat 7. But one of the reasons that you do it, if you start on a strong beat, right? So you end up, so you start strong beat, weak, you have a passing tone, strong beat, you have a chord tone, and then strong beat. So on all the strong beats, you're getting chord tones, and that passing tone always ends up on a weak beat. Well, that same thing can be said for anywhere in the scale, in this Dorian scale, that you have a whole step, you can fill it in those chromatic notes, right? That's where I was getting lines. So I did this. That was just kind of an entire descending line. Well, that's not what I played. I played. So here, now I'm thinking really back cycling there. There's your D7 chord right there. And then I'm filling in right there from the D. That's part of the bebop dominant scale there. But like I said, anywhere that would be a line that would work there. So I'm playing. So right there, I didn't even use the chromatic. I'm using a lower neighbor, upper neighbor. So I'm using here, if I got an A minor 7, from the 9th to the root. Alpha signal, no rules of music, just play notes and be different. No. Just play notes and you're groping. You got to play notes in the right places. Otherwise, you're just a groper. That's a term we used to use for people that actually didn't know their way around changes. Unfortunately, there are rules. Unfortunately, for people that don't know them. Flailing, that's a good one. We just call them gropers. People that, people that say things like, well, you're always one note away from a right note. What was it? I heard a saying last night on my live stream. Hold on, I saved it to use. I'm going to use it for the first time ever today. Here it is. Let's see here. It's, there are no such thing as a wrong note, just the poor choice. There you go. Victor Wooten said that. Said what? There's no such a thing as a wrong note, just a poor choice. Gropers for life. So the thing is that people, the guys like Pat Martino, Wes, Matheny, all these people that can play bebop really well, once you get the feel of it, you can pretty much play anything anywhere if you play it with conviction. That is true. If you listen to, I want to say I'm trying to think. There's a Jerry Bergonzi video where he's playing everything a half step out and then coming back into the key, but he plays it with such feel. Jerry Bergonzi's a great sax player. He lives in Boston. Victor Wooten is definitely not, does not get credit, and I love Victor, but he did not say that. The half step away from a right note. I'm older than Victor, and I heard that before Victor was born. That's been around forever in jazz. That was around back in the 60s. I heard that stuff. But Jerry Bergonzi would play things that he could really. I mean, he's a killer player, and he could play just completely out of key on purpose. But he played it with such conviction and with such feel, it sounded phenomenal. But what you want to do is you want to know where you're going. I mean, ultimately, that's your lines that have directions, and you know it when you hear it. Ultimately, when you hear a great jazz player that is making the changes, you can pull away any of the accompaniment. You don't need a bass player. You don't need anything. You can hear the changes being made just by the lines that are going. If I'm going through and I'm playing I did a video a while back called the Circle of Fifths Puzzle. And I started on, let's say I start on A7, and I play it. So I went, listen to it. So I'm right? So there's I'm playing over those chord changes, and without even hearing the chords, you can hear that. So those are all really obvious choices of that you do not need to hear the accompaniment to know I'm playing. That I'm playing right over the cycle. It's very obvious. The same thing is when you hear, right? So if I play. So I played, I'm thinking E minor 7, I'm going. So I'm going. Ba, 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 da, 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 da. I could play my Gibson. I know it sounds kind of plinky there. I got my Gibson right here. This will sound better. So if I play. Wow, that's so much louder, man. So I played, right? There's B7. And I went to the third of the A7. And I just played chromatic down to the fifth of the D major 7th chord. Right? So. And I did that D major 7 sound there. But once again, you can hear, I don't need any background. But if I'm playing something like this, just groping around in a Dorian scale. It doesn't sound like anything. It's you got to be playing those chord tones on strong beats, and the non-chord tones are on accented beats, and the non-chord tones and passing tones are on the weak beats. Now that's not always true, but it's mostly true. You could start your solo, you got a B flat 7 chord, and I can play. I can play. Right? So I'm playing that 13th on purpose, and it really can get that sound. Let's see here. Let me read some of these things. Joni knew absolutely what she was doing. She was tuning the guitar to match the harmony that she wanted the guitar. I assume you say Joni, you're talking about Joni Mitchell. I don't know how Joni Mitchell kept track of all the tunings in all of her songs. She had some unbelievably great tunings. I have no idea how she did that. Anyways, but thinking over these minor 7th chords, let's get back to that. So one of the hardest things that people, I feel, would stumble over, a lot of the people that I went to college with, is playing on rhythm changes on the bridge. It wasn't just the A section, it was the bridge. What do you do when you got a bunch of dominant chords in a row? And the kind of the Pat Martino idea was really I think was kind of, that was eye-opening for me back then. And I would hear Joe Pass do it. I heard Wes do it. Where you don't hear Metheny do it as much, because Metheny used a lot more chord tones and really specific sub changes and things like that. But guys that used a lot of chromaticism that were more out of the Charlie Parker school that came up in that era before Pat, really, just before Pat, you had a lot of those guys that would think minor 7th chords on dominant chords. So once again, so let's say I'm playing the bridge to rhythm changes. So I'm going. And then I'm going to lead back to this note here. This note's an important note because it's either the 7th of my G7 chord, which is my next chord, or it's going to be, I'm going to go D9 to D minor 7 to G7. So I played what did I play? So I went to the 3rd of that D minor 7. The code for the book and my YouTube transcription, 100-page transcription, $10 off each, is RB251. That's easy to remember. Go to my website right now. You can get it at rickbeato.com. It's only for 24 hours. Okay, so let me play the line again. So I start on the downbeat. 1, 2, 3, 4. Right? So I got that part. Or I play. I think I played something like that. Yeah, that's what I played. So I ended on that. I want to end on that 13th. So. You can play. Right? So I'm using the 3rd of D minor 7 down to the 5th, and then I do a chromatic line down to the 5th of the G7 is kind of what I'm thinking. What'd I do? Yeah. There's the root of the G7. there's a seventh over there. So, right there, so here's my line. I'll play it slow. 3, 4. I could play the same thing down a whole step. Over the next part is a C7 chord, right? Which is going to go to F7, and I'm going to think C7 or G minor 7 to C minor 7. That right there gives you that sound of the, what is this thing here? Huh. I don't know why I didn't just block that. It was weird. Who is that person? Magic Mirror Mystery School. Gonna be blocked if I see it again. There we go. Boom. So once again, I'll play it. I'm gonna do the same line down a whole step over both sets of 2 chords. Okay, I got that. Repeat. Down a whole step. Right? And then we're back to the beginning of. So if I go. Right? So I do a little rhythm like that. So I'm going, then I get C7. Right? That's, or I can go somewhere different on the second 2 chords. But since the chord progression in rhythm changes, the first 2 chords, right, you get D7 to G7, and then you get the same relationship of C7 to F7. It's just down a step, as you can see when I play the chords like that, right? So, but maybe I say, okay, I'm going to work out 2 different lines to play. Maybe the first one is... And then I'm going to play. So I did. Or I'll do something even simpler. Let's do something like this. Okay, so let's do this. How did I play? Okay, so I played something different that time because I'm improvising. It seems like you're often starting in the middle of the fretboard by default. How and why, Rob asks. Because it's easier to see when you're looking at it. If I'm not playing up here, it's easier to see what fret I'm playing when my hand's straight on. That's why. Plus, the notes are... I have all these notes available up here that are easy to reach, and I have all these notes down here that are easy to reach. This is why knowing all your notes everywhere in the neck. It doesn't matter. I can play up here. Right? I can play there. right? I can play up there as well. But once again, so I played what did I play there? On the G minor 7. You can hear that C minor. Right? So, kind of sounds like Donna Lee, guy. There you go. That's really the, it sounds like Charlie Parker is really what you're talking about. Because that's where the chromatic lines are. So when I went to the C7 chord, I'm thinking G Dorian. That's a very common bebop thing. So I'm thinking, right? Then I went. I'm doing F altered. Playing around the horn, enclosure. I'm using a lot of enclosures, but one really key thing, and I don't really talk about this that much because it never occurs to me, but yes, my Gibson is it's not a special, it's a Les Paul Jr. Jack asked, my yellow guitar, or whatever color it is, greenish, mustard colored. But this thing, when I do this, I forget what I did there. Right there. So I'm moving out of position, and I'm using my pinky to move out of position. So, what'd I do? Yeah, I could have played, but it doesn't feel the same. But you just hear those kind of sounds. That's the thing, is this is a beast playing on this guitar. I said on my other live stream, this guitar has 13s to 56 on it. And it's a workout. I mean, it is really hard, but that's why it's so loud. Did you hear how much louder it is than the other guitar? It's like 3 times as loud. I was plinking out on that guitar, and all of a sudden, I pick up this one. I was shocked at how loud it was. Okay, so I keep getting asked, how do you practice enclosures? Well, a lot of the stuff I'm not doing are not necessarily enclosures. Sometimes I am doing enclosures. Like I'm doing, a lot of times I'm doing these chromatic, these passing tones to a chord tone. So I'm doing like, that's not an enclosure, but that's not really an enclosure. I have a target note. That's a target note, right? That's like a suspension, and there's a resolution. That's really how you get this stuff that that sounds really like bebop. There's no enclosure there, but I'm doing that note is resolving, and then resolves down there. There's really a line. Do I gent with a G-H-E-N-T? That's pretty good. Right? So let me play that whole line then from A minor 7. Let's see. Oh, man. I changed the ending of it. Sorry about that. No. Now, an enclosure, let's talk about enclosures for a minute. Enclosures, a great example, are the kind of licks that Joe Pass does. Okay, that would be enclosures. So I'm thinking of a B flat major 7 chord, and I'm using an enclosure, but I'm using neighbor tones in the scale. Right? C, A, B flat. And then here I'm using the flat third up to the natural third. And then right there is a 6, sharp 4 to 5. Anyway, so that would be an enclosure. And then another enclosure would be, that would really be enclosure is to do that. So if I take a target note, like the 5th of the chord, okay? 1, 2, 1, 2. So I'm gonna go 1, 2, ba da 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 da, right? 1, 1, 2, ba da 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 da, down beat. You want to add on a strong beat with your enclosures. That doesn't really work around the 3rd, though, right? Sounds lame. It doesn't work on there. Works there on the root. On a major 7th chord, it works on the root. It works around the 5th. Doesn't really work around the 3rd, right? Right. I would play something. I'd probably do that. It'll do a lead up into the 3rd. So. There would be an enclosure line. Or that would be another kind of thing. That would be like a B flat major 7. I'm doing 6, 5 to 4, 3. That's using all neighbor tones. It doesn't have to always be enclosures. And then I do a descending line. I go to the 6. Now what I do? No. I forgot what I played. I can't remember what I did. Could do that, you know. I can't remember what I played. It's really confusing. But practicing enclosures is, you know, it's more about line direction. That's kind of the thing, because putting intervals in these things, right, is really more interesting. When I did that, you know, if I'm thinking D minor 7. It's less confusing if you get my book. Beato book is on sale. What's up, Joe? I'm I'm thinking if I'm just playing over a G7 chord, but I'm thinking D minor 7. I'm going. So there's my interval jump. I'm thinking the 3rd to the 5th to the 9th, and then on chromatic. Or so I'm filling in those spaces, but really it's where you place the stuff on the beat. What is enclosure? How important is to know someone who doesn't play jazz? Jack just asked. You know, I don't know. How important is enclosure? It's for jazz. It's just one thing. I mean, you use them occasionally, and then, you know, it's just one of many things. It's kind of like, you know, negative harmony. Yeah, negative harmony is interesting, but it's just one interesting thing out of 100 interesting things to use. Really, it's where do you play this stuff, you know, in relation to the beat? Because ultimately, that's where the that's kind of where it separates the you know, the pros from the amateurs. It's a device. Thank you, Michael. It's a device, and it's one of many devices. I mean, Joe Pass used that lick all the time, but wouldn't say that's enclosures. I think most people think enclosures are a double chromatic thing, like the right is really kind of the quintessential. 2 below, 2 above, 1 below, and then up. It's surrounding the notes. We called them surround tones back in the old days. So that's, you know, these are the hardest things to do because there's so much ear involved in this. It's really, you have to be able to hear where these things are. And there's a lot of good examples. I used to listen to piano players, honestly. That's where I got hip to this stuff, because I thought all the piano players, like when I heard Oscar Peterson play, Art Tatum play, Bud Powell, Red Garland, Bill Evans. I heard these piano players, and I think that there's a, it's interesting because you can't bend notes on the piano. So you end up using a lot more, on sax, on guitar, everything, you can bend notes. You can do different things with notes. On piano, you're kind of stuck. So you end up playing more chromaticism in there as your way to bend notes, and so I think that the guys would find ways to turn around lines. What's up, Peter? Good to see you. Would turn around lines in a really interesting way, and I would figure out a lot of Oscar lines like that, because I thought that he would have this. He would play these really extended lines that would be like Charlie Parker lines, but they would just go on and on. And I thought it was so interesting. And Joe just said, so much of this involves rhythmic studies. It's absolutely true. Because it's where you place the things. You got to really be aware of the beat all the time, because where you place the stuff is so important. You always need to be thinking, it's like, where am I? What kind of motifs am I playing? Am I playing an idea that has the ability to be developed, and am I developing it? Am I continuing on the idea? Am I punctuating the idea? Do I have a phrase beginning and ending? Because those things are extremely crucial to your playing. And there's no, you got to transcribe and write a lot of lines. One of the things that I thought was really interesting in one of the sounding offs I did with Jeff Berlin, he talked about going back and studying with Charlie Banakis, who was a really famous improv and ear training teacher in Boston, who I personally never met, but I had a lot of friends that studied with Charlie. And Jeff does this thing during our interview that he talked about. Charlie would say, okay, I want you to take an A Mixolydian scale, but leave out the fourth, and I want you to write 100 lines in it and play it next week. And Jeff sang about 5-6 lines in a row, super fast during the my interview with him, the sounding off I did with him. He sang what he would sing in Charlie's lesson, and he sang it super fast. It was very cool to hear him do it. And he said that Charlie expected him to come back with 100 lines memorized over this, and that's where he, came up with a lot of ideas like that. That's how these guys learn to play. They learn to play over one chord. They learn where these chromatic notes go. They write things out. I would write solos out in addition to transcribing solos. I would write things out, and I'd write something out, and then I'd try and figure out 100 variations of it, of just one line. I would do, if I was doing a 2-5-1, I mean, one of my things I did in my book, I think I did, so I would take A minor 7, and I go down to D dominant diminished. So I'm thinking of 2, 5, hold on. It'd be like 2, 5, 1. And I'd think, now I played, right. Now that resolved to the root of the G major 7, but then I did a turnaround. I do, so and resolved to the third there. Instead, I jumped the octave. Instead of doing that, I did. Or to the third there, or to the fifth there. Right? I could do that. So all these are Dorian to tonic diminished down to Mixolydian. Why do I show the guitar but not the piano when playing? Because I can't. I have to use OBS on my computer because the iPhone app crashes all the time, and I can't. Set it up over there, unfortunately. I always use the force to the side. Yes, hold the piano in my lap. Yeah, so that's why I'm kind of until I'm afraid to try the new YouTube streaming thing on my phone, because every time it keeps crashing in the middle of my stream. So I gave up on it. I'm using this on the computer, so I'm kind of locked in here, unfortunately. Unless I can get a stand. No, I can't, because then I can't read the comments at the same time. I've thought about this a lot. Anyways, all right, I'm good for today. I got to go. Beato book on sale along with the YouTube transcription book. There's $10 off coupon. Go to my website, enter in RB251. That's it. See you guys later. Have a great day. It's been